Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Somewhere deep in the bowels of the city, a reckless pack of depraved hipsters prepares to wage war on traditional family values. You got your bank, your church, your malls, your cops, your guns, your righteous gall, your corporate loot, your fiscal balls. I can dig it. I can dig it.
Do the pea soup enemas come before or after the rats are released?
My collar's white, my nose is brown. I got a condo overlooking the town. When opportunity knocks, I can hear for blocks. I will soon come out here, the school of hard knocks. I'm a man of renown. There's no business in town that don't court me. Here's Satan's siren call, set to a lurid, throbbing backbeat. I can read your bow with one percutive howl. I'm a bourgeois booty. I'm lady-nudie. I'm roto-rooter in the sewer of love, love, love. I'll squirm and see there's self-righteous right-wing bigots fan the flames of the culture war with their pompous, hidebound moralizing and insipid state-sanctioned art.
I'm head over paws, I know it's futile. He's a two-cat dog and I'm a white-bread poodle.
She's a white-bread poodle.
Don't eat the crust.
She's a white-bread poodle.
It isn't even disgust.
Oh, yeah, right. A simple quiz, a crumb of justice, and I'm giddy for that mocking tick, tick, ticking of the endless final round. Witness hordes of self-loathing bohemian artists as they wallow in their pathetic self-flagellation while teetering on the brink of pathos. Who am I? And I cry. Existo! I can't imagine your skin ever rotting. Love thing! It's a mighty love thing at the crack of doom. It's a big long pipe bomb with a pink boom. It's a big boy strut with a little boy waddle. It's a kind of love thing with the fold-down throttle. Love thing. Until all forms of art are subsidized. Until the workers run the factories. Until condoms are dispensed with crayons. Until every flag comes with its own match. Until the sacred school prayer is replaced with a minute of angst and foreboding. Existo, a movie, nay, a film, so saucy, so reckless, it dares to call itself a musical.
If you have to go out and you see art, do not, I repeat, do not try to interpret it yourself. Call 911 and let the art squad defuse it.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Mr. Skizz-cyzyk.
I am the Cosmic Dowser, and I hold in my hand the ultimate divining rod.
Also with us this week is Mr. Scott-calonico.
Hello, everyone. Was that a quote from the movie that Skizz just did?
No.
This week we are looking at the 1999 film Existo from filmmaker Coke Sams, co-written by Sams and bruce-arntson, who stars as the titular living legend of the underground art scene. The film is set in a world where freedom-loving folks have tucked the country into a bed of family values where they've snuggled up to corporate ideals, just as God intended. But wouldn't you know, that rabble-rouser Existo and his band of performance artists threaten the status quo. Existo isn't one of the easiest movies to see, but if you want to check it out before listening to this discussion, it's out on YouTube, and it's embedded into the posting for this episode at projection-booth.com. We're going to be getting into some spoilers, so I'd encourage you to check out the film first and come back. We will still be here unless the show has been outlawed before then. Skizz, when was the first time you saw Existo, and what did you think?
I think it was 98 or 99. I can't remember. I was working as a projectionist at the Atlanta Film Festival. One of my shifts was scheduled to end early, and Genevieve McGillicuddy was the festival director that year. And I asked her, hey, it seems like I've got an early night. And she said, that's because when you're done, you need to get over to this other theater and watch this movie Existo. And all she told me was, it's the people that did all the Ernest movies, but don't let that scare you away. I programmed this because I think you're going to love it. And I went and I loved it. I could not believe it. I came home from Atlanta telling everybody about this film. I was trying to get it to my festival, Micro Cinefest, and I couldn't get anybody from the film to call me back. Finally, I think it was Clarke Gallivan, one of the producers, called me back, and I got the impression they made this film for the fun of it, a bunch of friends getting together, making a movie that make themselves laugh. They expected more of a response. They didn't get it, so they're just going to kind of put it on a shelf and write it off as a loss. And I said, well, before you do that, let me show it one last time at my festival, because I think you just haven't found the right audience. So we showed it. It won awards. Our press release went out. They immediately started getting invited to a bunch of other festivals. And the next thing you know, people are asking me if I've heard of it. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know Existo well.
How about you, Scott? It seems like this might have been a recent watch for you.
Yeah, I actually just watched it a couple hours ago. I think this is probably, I knew about it through Micro Cinefest. I think I probably read it in some of the programs or whatnot. And I guess this is like kind of like I've never seen. I only know of Black Shampoo through Mike. So this is kind of like Skizz's version of Black Shampoo, I guess, maybe. It's just like I've heard of it, and I kind of knew it was about there, but I've never actually watched it. So I guess I've heard about it since probably about the same time as Skizz, but I've never gotten around to seeing it.
Skizz, when did you show this at Micro Cinefest? Was that 99?
I think it was 99, yeah. I seem to remember that, that 99 makes sense, because it ended up coming back to Baltimore for a theatrical run, and bruce-arntson and Coke Sam's came with it. And I remember them telling me that it had been rejected by all the dance fests in Park City, Utah that previous year, Sundance and Slam Dance, and there were several others at the time. And I also remember, being out there that year and thinking I didn't see any American films that year that I loved as much as this one. And it just really kind of angered me that had been rejected, that Park City hadn't gotten behind this film.
This seems like it was ready-made for Slam Dance.
Yeah. You would think.
I saw this at the Micro Cinefest, so it must have been 99. I imagine I was on the jury because I was kind of like the perpetual jury member for a long time. So I loved it. If I wasn't on the jury, I would have voted for it to be Best Picture anyway. But yeah, this was a fantastic film, and it has stuck with me for years. Some of the images in the film, some of the songs, I mean, one of the first songs in the movie, Fucking A, that has stuck with me forever. And just the sight of this guy with this long black hair with this crazy white streak in it bouncing on this illuminated ball as he's, trying to play Russian roulette.
Fucking A. Fucking A. Fucking A! Fucking A! Fucking A! Fucking A! Fucking A! Fucking A! My thoughts are oily. Slick advancement for the coming nightmare. They leave me shaking, they sucker punch me, then they slip away. My clammy sheets reflect a random flash of lightning. Then the searchlight, then the spotlight, then the flashlight in the face. Yeah, fucking A.
So many great things in this film, and so much of it has stuck with me for so many years that when the opportunity presented itself, I was just like, this movie speaks to the political world that we're in today, even though it was made in 99. I mean, it just has that craziness that sings to me in 2016.
And speaking of politics, I love how it kind of skewers both sides.
I love that as well.
Neither side comes out looking good, although the side I'm on, I tend to be more entertained by. So the side I'm not on, I feel sorry for how badly they're skewered. But I'm wondering if somebody on the other side would think the same way about my side.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the bouncing on the penis bit. That was the song number where he's jumping on the penis around the room. If they would just move that a little forward, I think that would have kept my attention a little bit more up front.
Yeah, I was noticing that the pacing of the movie is a little strange, and well, I know we'll talk about the two different cuts of the film, but it takes us a little while to finally get into more of the actual plot of the film, because there are moments in the beginning where it's just kind of like song after song. Not that I'm complaining, because I actually really love every single song that's in this, even Penelope's song, the White Bread Poodle song. I mean, just so many great songs in here. We do sacrifice a little bit of the plot for the music at first. Skizz, should we talk about the festival cut of this? I mean, that's the one that you're more familiar with, correct?
There's an original cut and then a recut, and I like to think of the original cut as the VHS and the recut as the DVD-R. The original cut is the Don't Do Me beginning, and then the recut is the flashback beginning.
Okay, I think I saw the flashback one with they're talking about President Bush and whatnot.
This is the Daily Truth Radio Network. I'm Marion White. Fireworks lit up the Capitol last night as revelers from across the nation celebrated the Supreme Court's 5-4 decision to grant President Bush an unprecedented 4-year extension on his term of office. In addressing the court's postponement of this year's election, Justice Scalia wrote in the majority opinion that another drawn-out presidential campaign would only serve to question the legitimacy of the president, thus giving the terrorists exactly what they want.
The biggest difference in that is that there's an opening that takes place before those opening credits, and that opening radio broadcast really isn't there in the festival cut. So we start off at this cabaret where we have Colette Watchuwill doing this terrific number, and that's where we're introduced to Existo and Maxine and some of the other players. And so that takes place before it kind of sets the stage a little bit as far as what the world is. And we see that Existo is definitely a little bit damaged. He's not quite running on all 8 cylinders when we first meet him.
Which is explained in the second cut. Without that explanation, his very first line of dialogue just sounds so surreal. But then with the second cut, you realize what he's talking about, except then that line is missing from that version of the film.
Oh my God, there's so many levels here.
They almost need to do a third cut and mash it all together.
Yeah. Which wouldn't be hard to do.
Yeah, maybe it's a job for somebody with some time on their hands.
The Existo fan edit.
That's right, exactly.
But we've quickly learned that we're in a world where we have these broadcasts from Armand Glasscock, who's played by Mike Montgomery, who speaks to us via television. Safely. We are very into television in this, and talks about what kind of world that we're in, and just it seems like the moral majority has definitely won the day, and they seem to be the ones that are in charge. So this whole idea of these artists who are out there, Existo and Colette Watchuwill and Maxine and all of these great people, I mean, their club is literally called the Underground, and they are on the outskirts of society. In fact, it seems like most art has been outlawed at this point.
Isn't the club called the Sewer?
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Why did I think it was the Underground?
Well, because it is underground. I mean, they come in and out through that little tunnel and stuff.
And one of these players that is in here is Marcel Horowitz, who's played by Jim-Varney, and it's always nice to see Jim-Varney show up in other things. And around 99, I want to say Jim-Varney was, he had definitely been doing a lot of the Ernest films and everything, but I want to say that this was around the time that he was doing things like the Beverly Hillbillies and stuff. So it's interesting to see him show up in just a tiny but powerful role. He's just kind of like, he's there, but we don't focus on him more than just a few times.
The restaurant bit is the part I remember.
And I like that he comes back to life. Like, we're told that he's dead, and then he shows up again. Oops, spoiler. If I remember correctly, this was his last live-action role.
Yeah, I think I saw something like that, too, yeah.
Because he then went into more of the Toy Story, and I think he was doing The Simpsons, just a small role on The Simpsons right around this time. The Beverly Hillbillies was earlier, because I'm thinking of when I actually sat down and watched that. It must have been like 95 or something like that, 94. So, all right, interesting that he just moved into the VO role.
If only there were a database where we could look it up.
That was online, this interweb somewhere. We'll talk to our people.
Existo is back. He's been away for a long time, and he's back to kind of, what would you say, Skizz, kind of fire up the art community, because he comes in and starts doing these performances, and there's at least one where it almost feels like he's channeling some outside force in order to inspire the folks to take up arms against the powers that be.
Yeah, he's rallying the troops for a guerrilla art attack. Roving bands of public performance art.
Yeah, well, remember they were talking about a Mapplethorpe, something about doing something along the lines of a Mapplethorpe, and yeah, their guerrilla art show, the names of what they were doing were all pretty good.
There's the sound of almost bombs falling in the background at one point when they're trying to get through to one of the artists. And so many of the people have passed away on their exhibit, or they aren't there anymore. So now they're doubling and tripling roles.
Yeah, we're all double acting or something. Yeah, that was a good one. That was like being in the bunker.
Stage Mother, is that you? This is Pandora. Do you read me? Over.
Pandora, this is Stage Mother. I read you. Where the dickens are you? Over.
We're on the edge of Greystone Manor Square. I can see the gazebo from here. The place was swarming with pigs a few minutes ago, but it looks like they've all cleared out. We've got 2 actors down. We need a new concept. Over.
Pandora, hang tight. I'm going to put Mo on. She's got the concept.
All right. Do you have enough of the black fabric to cover the gazebo? Over.
Negative. Could possibly cover the uprights and part of the lattice. Definitely not the roof.
Shit. All right. Cover what you can. Whoever's playing the German industrialist will now cross stage right and immediately impale himself with a cross. No more flag. He goes right into the corporate mission statement. Do you copy? Over.
There's another person that we haven't talked about who is Ruben Dupree, who's played by Mark Cabas, and he's kind of on the outs from the powers that be, but he wants to be there. He's like this kind of simpering brown noser and is really sucking up to Glasscock. Boy, that sounded wrong. He's working for Glasscock, but he's accepted in the club. Barely. I mean, Maxine can barely control her dislike of this character, and it sounds like he sold her and everybody out at one point.
I got the impression that maybe he and Maxine and Existo were a threesome at some point, and then he sold them out. But unless I'm reading too much into the movie, that was the impression I got.
And I have to say that I love the crew of the people at the sewer, and just everybody has their own specialty, and they do that great kind of round table thing where they're going through all of the different people and what their expertise is, and especially the one guy who wants to try to correct Maxine and talk about his new concept and how he really is working on this. I mean, you're right, Skizz, it really does skewer both sides, because so many of these people are so full of themselves when it comes to their art, and it's wonderful that no one is left unscathed in this film.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the one during that same scene where they introduced the one artist woman, and she says she was working. They introduced her as working in rat feces or something, or rodent feces. Yeah, and then she says not anymore, but that's okay.
I don't want to derail the meeting.
Right, exactly.
We finally get Rupen and Glasscock working together. They're going to kind of, what is it? Rupen says that he can help turn Existo and use him as a tool for the moral majority instead of being this tool of the arts. And he decides to enact the power of pussy, as it were, and have the introduction of Penelope, who's played by Jenny Littleton, who is just this. Oh my God, I love her character. Just the squeaky voice and this kind of ingenue that she is.
Doesn't Colette call her a Pop-Tart?
Yes, she is a Pop-Tart. She brings in this song that has nothing to do with anything other than describing her character as being this white bread poodle. As all of the other songs, they get into some deeper stuff.
I'm a little purebred. Yes, it's true. My blood is blue. My papers tell of breeding nonpareil. Though I cause my family pain, I must get off this gravy train. There's a dog across the tracks that I must smell.
The lyrics to that song, the differences between her white bread poodle and I guess Existo's junkyard dog. I'm bathed in perfume. He rolled in something dead. There's just so many great dog references to the lyrics of that song.
In his songs and the songs that he does with Maxine, the other one that always sticks out for me is the one where they don't even really have very many lyrics. Just that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Right. Oh. Yeah. Right. Oh. Yeah. Right.
I mean, if you need some songs, this movie will do it for you too.
And Skizz, I think that you've been on mostly musical episodes, which is, I think, fitting.
It's one of my favorite genres.
It's fantastic. And like I said, all of the songs in here, I mean, they really work for me. There's not one song on the soundtrack where I'm just like, oh, yeah, let's fast forward past that. And then even the incidental music, I think, works really well, especially the scene that Scott was just talking about where Existo and Penelope have kind of finally hooked up. And I do like that she doesn't really want to have anything to do with him sexually or really any other way. She is very much, just kind of pretending and using him. And the artists break in and they set up a bomb under the bed, and they have the artists at one point are about to get caught, so they have to hold the bed up almost all night long so they don't blow up.
Yeah.
But that moment afterwards when he wakes up and he tries to commit suicide and one of the guys is chasing him around, I mean, I love that music that's happening during that whole kind of cartoonish chase. It's
definitely reminiscent of the music that Bruce did for the Ernest Saturday morning show.
But yeah, there is that great moment that we mentioned earlier, the when Penelope and Existo are out to lunch, and Jim-Varney's character comes in and does that very public art display. Marcel comes in and does that, calling him out, and then ends up, getting shot in the nose?
Yeah, that was it, yeah. And then so we don't ever know, I saw some comment, the comments for this are pretty good on that, and I did find that internet thing that we were talking about. But he comes in and he's they called him cream of wheat guy or something. What is he's got underwear on, and then he's got some kind of substance plastered all over him, and they never really explain that. Did I miss something there?
He almost looks like a greasy strangler.
I was going to say.
Oh my God, you don't.
I think it's just art.
Okay, was he doing some kind of art piece maybe before that?
Yeah, and again, just kind of skewering that art scene, that is how he's going to make his public statement, I suppose.
Okay, there we go. All right, fair enough.
I never thought I'd see Jim-Varney completely covered head to toe in, whatever that is, cream of wheat or plaster of Paris. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward thing. It's good versus evil, but kind of good versus evil. And along the way, we kind of get to see if that moral majority wins, the kind of world that we might live in. And I'm surprised that they haven't rounded up everybody at the sewer and kind of put them in camps,
Big spoiler, because the ending shows that perhaps the conservative side is right about something. Prediction that's made that ends up coming true at the very end, and you're like, oh, crap, that's a whole nother movie right there.
I know, and it's I know we'll never get Existo 2, which I so wish that we would.
Maybe. Kickstarter's always out there, Mike. That was interesting, too, at the very beginning where they do whatever their religious TV show, and they say sponsored by blah, blah, blah corporation, which is was a bunch of different corporation names altogether. But then that's been making the internet rounds now, is that we have that map where it's basically 6 corporations that are controlling all of the media right now.
I was amazed a few years ago when I was working for Georgia Pacific and Unilever, and just seeing that between those two companies, it's pretty much everything that you eat or use to wipe your body or anything like that, all from these two companies.
Yeah, I was working for a security software company, and it turned out one of our biggest competitors was owned by the same venture capital firm. So if you trade, so it was we were competing against ourselves. It was kind of odd.
I love that we get these cutaways to Mr. and Mrs. America, and the guy's got this weird, like, empty head thing going on where they put, like, chip dip in it.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. So I didn't realize what that was until I read your notes, and I was like, oh, that's kind of, symbolic of the audience or the reality or of the society at the time. Isn't that the same guy who's playing the evil dude, too? Like the guy on the couch.
Yeah, I thought he looked like Rupin originally. Yeah. I don't think it is.
I can hold on. I'll put myself as official fact checker, and I'll look. That's what I'll do right now.
I love that part of the one song where he starts telling the story about the coworker calling him and him pretending to be like a third world refugee. It's like, and finally the guy says, "No, it's Parker, but he had me going. He had me going."
Bob, I talked to Parker the other day at Evans and Weintraub, and I told him to hold on to those mutuals until we could get a clear sense of the kind of fourth quarter margins we'll be looking at. Well, he said, "I'm sorry, but you must have the wrong number. I'm a pitiful third world refugee, literally living at a subsistence level. I just lost my wife in a raging flood, and my children are eating the feet off a dog." Well, I had to stop for a second and thought, what the hell? Well, he finally laughed and said, "This is Parker, but he had me going. 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 He had me going."
When the members of the moral majority finally come to the club, and it's supposed to be this whole, the prodigal son has returned, and he's now going to be a tool for us instead of for the underground. The song that he sings there, and just talking about how much money he's got and how that's fulfilling every single need, and just really playing off of that whole idea of greed for all intents and purposes is good. And like I said, so many good songs in this.
I remember getting the soundtrack CD, and the one song that wasn't in the film, Our Love Festers, I remember thinking, oh, I'm so glad they left this out. But then it's used as the closing credits music on the second version of the film with Existo and Maxine singing it. And now when I see it, I think it's such a brilliant performance. I mean, the two of them singing these harmonies together of this like sort of nonsense scat singing, and then the lyrics themselves are hilariously gross. Again, yeah, somebody needs to make a fan edit and figure out where that scene was supposed to come and put it back in there, because one more great song to add to that film.
I have to say that the woman that plays Maxine, what's her name? Jackie Welch, is that right? Yeah. She does such an amazing job in this, and she is just right there matching all of this lunacy. And so it really didn't surprise me to see that she had gone all the way back to being on the Hey Vern show with these guys, because she just knows the rhythms, and all of these people, it's a well-oiled machine. The guy who plays Colette Watchuwill, again, he's right there with all of this, and just this whole thing, it feels like it had been rehearsed and practiced so long before it came in front of the camera, because there's this fluidity to it that you don't get in too many other low budget movies, and this doesn't necessarily look low budget either. I think the transfer looks bad, and I would love if they could go back and kind of clean that up, but it's very well filmed. It's beautifully framed. The everything about it is very professional. And I was, it's one of those movies where when it doesn't make that big break, you're just like, well, why not? There's so many other movies that are of lesser value or say less or just don't look as good that they get out there. But Existo is pretty much top notch to me.
Time to do an HD transfer and make a DCP and get it on the revival circuit.
I think so.
Yeah.
We'll put you in charge of that, Skizz.
I would do it if I.
While we're talking about Jackie, just as our appointed, self-appointed trivia guy, I just thought she is a certified neurolinguistic programming coach. Apparently now she's a life coach. That's what she does.
And I think she's still acting too.
Yeah, it looks like she does. She's still out there and about. Yeah, out and about there too. But in addition to everything else, so she's multi-talented, does a few things. And I did think I recognized her from Ernest too.
Mrs. Simon Simmons, I think, on the Ernest show.
Yeah, that's it. That's correct. Oh boy. All right.
I can tell that Scott is all fired up here to talk about some Ernest stuff. So let's go ahead and take a break, and we're going to play a trio of interviews. The first one we'll hear from is director Coke Sams. Then we'll hear from the star and co-writer Bruce Arntson. And the third one we'll hear from is J. Clarke Gallivan, the producer. And we'll be back with those right after these brief messages. And I kind of hope that this week Blog Talk Radio sends us another set of Donald Trump ads, because I can't really think of anything more or less appropriate.
All right, I'm here with Bill Byforce and Mr. Chris to tell you a little bit about Outside the Cinema.
All right, Reverend Scott, take us to church.
What can we expect to find from a typical show?
2 hours of just random blabber.
Is there anyone's coattails you rode in on to popularity?
I'm the guy that f***ing burns the coattails and then pisses on them.
You review all these exploitation, horror, comedy, cult, and often all-around terrible movies. You must have a strong driving force that keeps you going.
Ego.
I don't know if I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a while.
Really?
I have been saying that for a while. Also, I'm high on smack.
Well, it's definitely working for you guys. People are coming out in droves to support you on iTunes.
We just the other day got a 1-star review on iTunes.
Well, that is 1 star too many. Let me tell you, the worst f***ing piece of shit I've ever heard.
This has been great, guys.
Thanks, Scott. That was good. Oh, he's got you crying over there.
I'm good for the rest of the year.
Nice.
That was too much.
Wife Jessica, I have an idea.
What's that, husband Dustin?
As you know, we love movies.
Yes, dear, I know.
But we also love podcasts.
I'm aware, my love.
And then there's this other part of us that really loves movie commentary tracks.
Get to the point, sweetheart.
Well, if we made a movie podcast / commentary track hybrid audio program, it would certainly be the best married couple movie podcast / commentary track hybrid audio program on the internet, right?
Without doubt. But whatever would we call it?
We are the Popcorn Poops. Popcorn Poops is a weekly podcast hosted by married couple Dustin and Jessica Kramer.
That's us.
Each week we choose a movie based on a monthly theme, and then we sit down and record a syncable commentary track as we watch the movie.
But what makes Popcorn Poops special is that you don't have to sync up our podcast to enjoy the show, so you can listen to us like you would any other standalone podcast.
On our show, we like to talk about theory, story structure, genre conventions, and trivia with a healthy dose of dick jokes.
Gotta have the dick jokes.
Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music.
Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram for frequent updates about the show, including our weekly movie still identification game.
Visit us on the web at popcornpoops.com. We'll be waiting for you, and not in a creepy way.
Okay, kind of a creepy way.
Yeah, okay, fair warning.
Movies need only 3 things. Badasses.
You tell me who you want done, and I'll do the hell out of it.
A chick with drive who don't take no jive.
Boobs.
Do you know that the female breast, known to be the source of life since Eve, can be deadly weapons?
And body counts.
Body count. The mathematics of murder and menace.
The BB and BC podcast is your source for exploitation film discussion of B-movies. You can find the show on iTunes and Stitcher Radio by searching for BB and BC podcast. You can also listen to each episode directly from the show's website located at badassesboobsandbodycounts.com.
Let's go to work.
It's an election cycle that makes parody and satire feel unwieldy. That it almost comes out of the gate as satire.
Doesn't need that middle filter.
It really doesn't. And to have 2 of the most unpopular candidates of all time, if this doesn't signal the end of both parties, we're missing a good chance.
I want to ask you about you, first of all, and how you kind of got into the business.
I got into the business as a writer, and that's really been, the basic nerd with the pocket protector. I started with that and have always loved writing, and I guess was raised in a time when the great American novel was kind of the fading goal of writers. And when I was coming along, the great American movie became more what I was interested in. And through just good fortune and banging away at the entertainment business, I had miraculously had opportunities to write a couple of really low-budget screenplays for money. One of the first ones, me and another guy split $1,500, my collaborator. And I felt like, gosh, with money like that, if those kind of riches lie ahead, where would this lead? So I started off writing genre pictures and cut my teeth on really karate movies and horror movies and very straight-ahead genre pictures where the guy that was paying for the screenplays said, I really don't care what you do, but we need a fight every 5 pages. In the other case of the horror movie, that we need something scary and awful to happen every 5 pages, which kind of provided a roadmap to pay off the genre. And I got into the film production business in Nashville. We started doing the first, I guess, quasi-legitimate movie I got into was working with, our company was working with Jim Varney, John Cherry, doing those Ernest commercials. Varney was a real comic dynamo, and the commercials caught on and started going national. And so we did a low-budget kind of sci-fi spoof called Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam, which went nowhere. But soon after that, Disney came along wanting to do something with Varney and with us. And because we had made Dr. Otto, we had a chance to do Ernest Goes to Camp. And because it made money, then that sort of launched, or very much launched, a franchise. We did 4 movies with Disney, and I think went on to do 7 or 8 more. And that really put me in the business. I would say just plain dumb luck is what got me going.
Did those karate and horror films, those get picked up? Did they get made?
They were made by a guy that owned drive-ins out west in Texas. He had decided, hell, I can do that. He would run Bruce Lee movies, and he would make his own movie. And I don't think they ever did much commercially, and I've never seen them since. But they were, it was a grand adventure, and that was in the 70s when it was more of a, there were crazy independents. Well, up in Pittsburgh, they were doing Night of the Living Dead, and that was started as a homegrown enterprise. And in North Carolina, there was a guy named Earl Owensby who I think owned heavy equipment and a construction company, and he was making independent movies, and it was kind of floating around. And I think this fellow just thought he could give it a try, and thank goodness he did. They were terrible, terrible movies, but it felt like a foot in the door.
What was Jim Varney like to work with?
He was a great guy, a good friend, and we got to work together, 20 years or more. There was so much energy within the guy, and he had never wanted to be anything but an actor. He always said he didn't want to be a fireman, he didn't want to be a cowboy, he wanted to be the actor that played them. He had grown up in Lexington, Kentucky, where he had been the theater nerd who won the state drama competition. He was so ready, and literally he carried all of us on his back. A tremendous talent. A lot of the early stuff, we would just get in a room and start bouncing ideas, and Jim would just take off on a tear, and I'd be writing as fast as I could. Film is a collaborative medium, and you get somebody like that that's just throwing out bits and pieces and characters and gags, and I feel like, I was helpful in structuring things and working with John Cherry, on forming stories around it. But Jim was a great physical comedian. He was great with slapstick. He knew a lot he had a good sense of people and the world and what would resonate. And he had always been an entertainer. And he was the engine of that whole machine. And the Disney people recognized it. And, the fact that he was great with character voices, Slinky Dog he did in the Toy Story stuff. And he was on the cusp, I think, what could have been a long, long career, and got sick and died. But a great guy to work with, and utterly one of the boys. Always fun with the crew, always happy to be working, just a joy.
Tell me about you meeting Bruce-Arntson. How did that happen?
There was a comedy group that I was working with in Nashville called Gonzo Theater. And they were doing sketch comedy. It was a really good troupe of people. And one night at one of their shows, Bruce came on and did a guest bit. And what he did was he walked out with a saxophone and played a kind of a real noir-y riff and started telling the story in this kind of Norwegian accent about it was a cold night in the city. The only sound he could hear was the sound of a distant dog howling, a dog frozen to a fire hydrant. And he went on and painted this picture of this guy and this woman that he had lost. And as he was telling it, he pulled a roll of saran wrap out of the bell of the saxophone and held it up in front of the audience and started waving it back and forth and doing a flashback transition to another part of the story, and then did another transition to bring us back in, and then he played some saxophone and walked off stage, and it just killed the audience. None of us had ever seen anything like that. And so I got to know him after that. Over time, we started working together. He's terrific with music, and so we got him to score. I think probably Ernest Goes to Jail might have been the first score that he did. He was working with Kirby Shellstead, and they were pumping out music. And scoring comedy is different than scoring anything else, because you don't want to be too much on the money. You don't want to just be wah, wah, wah. He had a real gift for melody and for the sincerity that it takes to play really stupid scenes dead serious. So we started working that way. And then as we became friends, then I got him to, we started co-writing together. And we wrote Ernest Goes to School together. This whole Ernest thing was a training ground for many, many of us. And so, we had this really money machine that was running. And so you'd look for, here's an amazingly talented guy like Bruce. So come on, let's write a screenplay together. And then we got good at that. And for a while, then we wrote a puppet movie. Guys came to us and said, can you do a puppet movie? So we wrote a puppet movie together. And then we pitched, Bruce had another pair of characters that we pitched out in Los Angeles. And next thing you knew, we had a development deal at Paramount, and we wrote a screenplay with them. And so we just started working together from there. In the entertainment business, if you see someone that has the kind of talent that Bruce has, you really want to find a way to do something together. Some funny people are fueled by anger or something dark, and Bruce does not seem to be at all, which makes him really fun to work with.
Who are some of the other people that kind of came out of this, for lack of a better term, Ernest School? Who were some of the other people that you worked with on a regular basis with all these Ernest films?
Gailard Sartain. He was established by then, but he was part of the troupe. He was he played the crazy weatherman on Hee Haw. He played the terrible, the racist sheriff in Mississippi Burning. He's had a long, wonderful career as a character actor, and he was part of the troupe. He was in that bunch. And who else was in there? We got to work with some really interesting Canadians. Linda Cash is the one that comes to mind. She was hilarious. I think she's from Toronto. The whole film community here, I could name people that learned their crafts here that mean nothing to you, but what we had was an up and running film industry here that got running in no small degree because Varney came along, and suddenly guys like me that had been doing okay had a real sense of purpose. I could still do country music videos. I could still do commercials. I could still do all the stuff I was already doing. And then I knew that I would end up writing 3 to 5 screenplays a year for the Ernest thing. They wouldn't all be produced, but often one was. And if whatever got produced, I'd be doing a rewrite. And there were people, there was a grip department that grew out of that, and equipment grew out of that, and sound department grew out of that. So it was a fine endeavor.
Well, and it seems like you kind of worked yourself through the ranks when it came to different roles with that as well. And I knew that you were a writer on these, but also seeing you as second unit director and then eventually director of something like Ernest Goes to School. How was that experience for you? Did you ever have this kind of inkling that you wanted to be a director when you started off writing these films early on?
Yeah, yes, I did. In my real life, I was already directing when that came along. I had partnered up with a guy named Jim May, and we had a film production company, and so we were already winning awards in advertising, and music videos were coming along, and we started doing really well with them. Part of what's fun about Nashville is it is an odd entertainment community. I grew up outside of Atlanta, which is another fine town, but it never felt like it had the entertainment. It was not Music City. And there was always a lot of work here, working for the record labels. And so, yeah, I wanted to direct. It was, and I think, if you have the basic temperament and you are a writer, you're essentially visualizing how this stuff will play. So if you then are willing to take some more time, and learn another craft, you can learn to communicate with actors. I was already doing live shows. I was doing live sketch comedy. I was doing some plays and theater work. And, a lot of it happened unintentionally, but most of it happened because I've really loved the entertainment business. I like either making people laugh or making them recoil in horror or whatever it is you're trying to do. So I had designs on that, and I've been able to keep putting one foot in front of the other. The writing has been a great craft to focus on.
What was the genesis of Existo?
I think we were doing a show with Jim-Varney again, an Ernest TV show for CBS. And I know that Bruce had a version of Existo by that point, because Existo appears in the show called Hey Vern, It's Ernest. And the way Bruce first introduced me to Existo is he said, I've got this character who I see him as traveling from elementary school to elementary school in a broken down station wagon. And he's an existential magician who performs in lunchrooms and teaches children the meaninglessness of life through magic. And it was such a funny idea to teach the meaninglessness of life through magic. And so he started working on the character at least that long ago. If you go back and actually, last time I looked, the entire series of Hey Vern, It's Ernest was available on Amazon for like $5 or $6. And it's 13 half hours of, I think, very peculiar comedy. But Bruce's part in there, Bruce did, actually that show was good for him because he was writing the show and he did Existo. He did he was half of a country music duo called Bill and Coo. And then he wrote a thing, it was like a sketch show organized around loose themes like holidays or food or scary things. And Bruce had a really interesting notion called the Clown Family. That was it was about a full-blooded clown who married a woman with no sense of humor, and they had twins, one of whom was a clown, and the other one was born with no sense of humor. So it was this odd little family unit that we shot like a sitcom. And Bruce would come into writing sessions and would have the damnedest ideas, and the way he worked was really different than most of the other guys. The other guys were more like what you think of as a writer's room where people are throwing ideas at the wall and they're entertaining each other. And Bruce would kind of hang back, and then he would show up with pages that would just knock you out, would just take everybody by surprise, both in how funny they were and how just original they were. So that I think this is a long, rambling answer to where did Existo come from. But that was the first incarnation of Existo. And then at some point, we decided to try to do an independent movie that was the movie that you ultimately saw. And then it sort of took a darker, more political turn. And also by that point, Bruce wanted to make it a musical. And the magic fell away and the idea of a magician fell away. And he was this sort of anarchistic musician.
Well, it definitely seems like he has quite a backstory when it comes to the film. It feels like this is the next chapter of what Existo has been doing.
Very much, very much. We didn't quite know how to handle that character, I would say, in some ways. We were trying to make an art movie and a comedy movie, and the music was so, I don't know, I loved the music that came out of that. And there were many things in it that I loved, and I felt like we were fortunate to get to make that one, and we were coming off of so much commercial success, and it felt like in a way we got tremendous support from the theater community, all those actors, everybody in the film community kicked in. It was a galvanizing production because so many people. I guess we had tried. You try to bank good karma as you go through life. And we had worked with so many folks for so many years regularly, we were loyal to them and they were remarkably loyal to us. And making that movie really was one of the great experiences of my life. It was so much fun. It felt like it was about something in a way that, and partly it was about getting Nashville actors, giving them very different roles than what they were usually having, and everyone that knows Bruce knows that he is a really one of a kind talent. The thing he's been doing for the last 8 or 10 years, the Doyle and Debbie Show, is one of the most durable and amazing theatrical productions I've ever seen, and it's been running now for 8 to 10 years. It runs here in Nashville every week. It ran in Chicago for 8 months. It ran in Denver for 5 or 6 months. It's won awards everywhere it's gone. And you just, with Bruce, you really just wonder what's going to happen next. And so Existo was a chapter in that. He's just one of the nicest guys ever. And this remarkable talent. So Existo was everybody that had ever worked around Bruce coming together to try to do something that would showcase his abilities. And so it was a grand party.
The movie has such a great, literal underground type of feel to it with the club and everything, but it sometimes feels subversive that it even got made. It seems like it must have been a real challenge to make something that doesn't necessarily seem like it would have held the most wildly commercial possibilities.
Yeah, you have a gift for understatement. It's funny to think back because at the time we were all, I say we in a loose sense, but many of us had been making a real, Bruce among us had been doing really well with Disney movies, with independent Ernest movies. The Ernest thing had just thrown off a lot of commercial success. And as with anything, I think if you're a searcher at all, if you continue to cultivate an original vision, then you tend to bridle at any constraints. And so we were really looking for something very different from the tremendously popular stuff we'd been working on. You always hope that lightning will strike whatever you do. And in many ways, I feel like the movie never really had a chance to get an audience. And, it played at a lot of festivals. It won a bunch of audience awards. It won some nice awards. And it was just so different. And timing is either your friend or your foe. And I think our sense of timing, and I guess I think it'd be fair to say that none of us were really familiar with the ins and outs of independent film marketing and distribution. And I think we had this thing, we didn't quite know what to do with it. We knew that it had it had some fanatic fans. It was offending some of the right people, which, I think was part of its intent. We had investors in it. We decided the best thing for the investors was for us to more or less put it to sleep so that they could take their investment as a write-off. It's never been widely available on DVD. It's never done streaming. And I do think about it now that the world has changed yet again, and the digital possibilities for streaming and for eclectic content has never been greater. So I do think about maybe dusting it off, bringing it out of the crypt and taking it back out there, just because it would be fun to have it seen. There's a lot of good work there. There are a lot of great songs in it. And Bruce and I were just talking an hour or so ago about another movie we're trying to do together. So I hope that it's not. I'd love to see Existo make one more trip through the park before we all fade into the sea.
Well, if somebody did want to see it today, is there a good way for people to find this film?
Not really.
How about the soundtrack?
Nope. There again. And partly because we've never taken it out. It bugs me that so many people put so much hard work into a thing and that it's not available. That there are halfway decent bootlegs, but what Bruce and I have talked about doing, and Clarke Gallivan, who produced the movie, is a co-conspirator. And Peter Curlin, also a co-conspirator. But I think what we may well do is, I'd like to have one more shot at color correction, and Bruce and I have just the tiniest little bit of editing that we'd like to do on the front, and then I think we may bring it out because it's kind of a time capsule for many of us, and some really terrific performances from some people that I've worked with my whole life. I hope that within the next year that it would become available, Mike.
What are some of your favorite memories of working on the film?
We had some resources, but there were days when we would have to do, say, 11 pages of dialogue and a song. And it's really daunting when you're working against a clock, and there you are telling these actors, most of whom were theater actors, that on such and such a day, we're going to basically turn a camera on and we're going to keep shooting, and everybody needs to be ready. And they were. And it was watching, well, part of what you were saying, it's that there was an anarchistic feeling. It felt like blows against the empire, and everybody was cranked up. And I think working with the actors was a great thing. There were some things that we thought would be simple. There were some bits with the car. We had a car that would run sometimes. Other times you couldn't make it run. I remember being in my car behind our picture car with the scene going on up there, with me pushing the car from behind with my car. Actually, the whole experience, the wrap party was exuberance. It was unbridled enthusiasm and joy. We had done the thing that no one thought we could do. And I guess there was just a joyous quality to it. Bruce had performed. He had gotten in shape like an athlete to do it. And Jackie Welch, who plays Maxine, is a wonderful actress. And she was totally in shape. Everybody knew their lines. And then the extras that came in to form the crowd in the clubs and in the different scenes, they would dress up. It felt like a Rocky Horror moment where I guess it was just the fact that everybody gave and gave and gave, and their hopes were so high. And it just makes for a good time. And in your heart, this may work or it may not, but the experience of making it really was joyful.
After Existo, you talked a little bit about the reception of the film and kind of what happened to that, but what happened with you? It seems like you kind of moved more into producing rather than directing, or were you still doing the commercials and music videos at that time?
I had more or less quit the music videos and commercials by that point. I've stuck with writing, and I've done a lot of producing. I found that I could work with Clarke Gallivan. She's a wonderful producer, and then what I found, another aspect of producing is helping writers write or writing. I found that I could do more. I was perfectly happy writing and producing. So directing fell kind of by the wayside. The only thing I really am eager to direct, I would love to work with Bruce on one more, on the Doyle and Debbie movie. I think that would be great fun. I've gotten to stay home more. I came off the road. I ultimately drifted away. Although Varney stayed a friend until he died, there was a time when I separated myself from that, and I had a semblance of a personal life, a wife that I wanted to spend more time with. And so I found ways to stay at home more, and that led to writing and producing, and it's been fun. I really the entertainment business takes you in the strangest directions and puts you in touch with some of the best people I think you could ever run into. I continue to enjoy it, and there's a handful of projects I would love to do, but a number of them would be with Bruce, just because to find a remarkably talented person like him, who is also a genuine human being, is a wonderful thing. We remain very close friends, and we have a few more things that we'd like to do together.
I know, of course, the entertainment industry has changed over the last 30 years or so, but how has the Nashville entertainment industry changed as you've been working in it for all of these years?
I guess internally, in Nashville itself, there actually is a film community. Digital equipment has made access to tools so much easier for everybody. And so I've gotten to work with a number of really excellent younger filmmakers. The fact that there's the Nashville TV show has meant that probably more Nashville film workers have health insurance and have made house payments now lately than ever. And there's another show some friends are making for CMT called Still the King with Billy Ray Cyrus. So there's actually a relatively vibrant film community here. There's the Nashville Independent Film Festival, which has never been stronger. And then there's almost an alternative film festival called the Defy Film Festival. I think ran this last weekend. It's kind of the other part about Nashville today, as opposed to Nashville when I started, that's very nice, is because Clarke Gallivan and I are back and forth to Los Angeles probably a week out of every month. And it's never been cool to be from Nashville until lately. And now there's a certain cachet to the work that comes out of here. There's a terrific sort of alt-country and alt-rock scene here. There's an Americana music scene here. There's a wide variety of music here, and I think it reflects the sensibility of a broader culture that is here. And you want to feel like you played some part. I feel like I certainly had an opportunity here to be a part of a community, and when we needed help on films, promo pieces, speculative pieces, there was never any shortage of help. So living here, really, it was the right size. I mean, it just has worked out. And to see it kind of come to, the town has totally changed from a sleepy little dumbass town to a place that has a wide cultural range of people and thought here. So, I've seen the meter move just a little in my lifetime.
And what are you working on these days?
It's working on a handful of projects. Like I said, Clarke Gallivan was a business partner for many years, and the two of us have decided that our last charge up the big hill, we have a couple of movie projects. One of them being Bruce's, one of them being an Ernest related reboot that we're trying to get started. And we're doing pitching some episodic shows. I'm doing some writing that I'm really enjoying. I don't know that I'm ever going to write anything other than screenplays, but I'm adapting a novel right now to a screenplay. It will be another independent movie. I've always dabbled, and I think I've never done it with greater purpose than I am now. And part of that is back to Nashville as a community. It's been, in addition to supportive, it's been a relatively inexpensive entertainment center to live in. And so that has really afforded me a level of eccentricity that I don't believe I could have developed anywhere else if I was having to hustle so hard just to keep, house payments up. I'm grateful to have stumbled into this town, and the people that I've met here have definitely influenced me, and together I think we've done some interesting work.
Mr. Sams, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic.
You're a fun guy. I mean, you make this very easy, Mike, and the esoteric nature of your request is refreshing. So I look forward to maybe we'll meet again, and if we ever do a new version or a final version of Existo, I'd love to get you one.
How did you get into show business, or how did you get into music, I should say?
Well, that was the main draw for me. That was my primary thing. And I played in rock bands growing up in high school. I moved to Nashville from Minnesota in my mid-20s for music. And I'm more backed into theater and film than anything. But it all started with music, and that kind of remains a focus for sure.
And how did you get involved with the whole Ernest phenomenon?
One of the directors and producers was a fan of my rock and roll circus show, and it's pretty eclectic. It was pretty eclectic music. I was all over the map, and he thought that would be appropriate for their Saturday morning CBS kids show that they were about to do, which was kind of on the heels of the Pee Wee Herman phenomenon. And so they had a weekly Saturday morning CBS show, and I wrote a little song for each of them. Is how it started. And then out of that, the main guy that ran the Ernest organization asked if I would score the next Disney film that they did. So it kind of all just spun out from there, and I got sucked in. I basically learned how to write screenplays and everything else for that little Ernest school. A lot of us went to school with Ernest for film back in those days.
What was Jim-Varney like to work with?
He was great. He was a country boy, and so he was a product of the South, and all of that was real. But he just had this phenomenal talent and just this preternatural ability to do voices and caricatures and whatnot. And so, yeah, he was just a sweetheart, but he was definitely on all the time. There was never a dull moment. He told stories constantly and would regale everybody from his co-stars to the caterer. I mean, anybody who would listen, he would go. He was great.
Now, I know the Existo character was originally on Hey Vern, It's Ernest, but where did he come from before that?
I had invented him after I shut down my band. I tried to find a way to keep performing on my own, and so I invented him as a sort of failed magician who would travel around visiting grade schools and middle schools, teaching them the meaninglessness of life through the wonders of magic. So it was an existential magic show that he was a pathetic magician trying to expose these children to his misery and get paid for it. And so that was kind of the gist. I would, perform in local clubs, but that would be the ruse that everybody would be expecting. And then I would, frequently have guests and a guest band or whatever that would back me up. But most of the show was this bad magician.
Was there actually any magic involved with the show?
No. I had a vacuum packed brick of coffee that I would drill a hole into to show the void, and how our lives would just go dripping out as coffee would out of this vacuum packed void. And I mean, so they weren't really magical. It was just all very pathetic. And it was a way to get from song to song too, because I was sitting there at a piano this whole time.
How did he change or come to be on the Hey Vern show?
Moving on from the song per show, they asked if I would write some comedy. And so I had been doing improv and sketch comedy for a while with a group here in town called Gonzo Theater. And so I wrote myself in, and I ended up being one of the cast members as a result. And so I was flailing for anything I could think of. I thought, well, I could adjust that character to be actually more palatable to children than he was originally intended. So I just kind of buffed him up a little bit and made him appropriate. But he was still a failed magician for sure. But the movie really brought me back to the original Existo, which was much more morose and pathetic.
It must have been something for you to be writing these songs for the show, help writing with the show, acting on the show, and then, I mean, the idea of going from that's a lot of work in itself, and then going from that into scoring one of these films when you, as far as I know, had never scored a movie before. That must have been quite a leap for you.
It was. It's one of the biggest lies I've ever told, that yes, I know how to score a film. So it was panic set in once I realized what I'd done. But I had a good friend that was much more traditional musically inclined with orchestral scores and whatnot. And so, and he was also more technically inclined. Had it not been for the computer and sequencing software, there's no way in hell I could have even come close to it. But if you've got a decent ear, then you can, you've got all these synthesizers and fake instruments at your disposal, and you can kind of shape an orchestral score. And I've always loved that kind of music. I've always loved Bernard Herrmann, and Danny Elfman was our generation's the guy who aped Bernard Herrmann better than most for a while. And so I kind of used that as my jumping off point, and then had plenty of help along the way, and friends who were actual orchestrators and whatnot. So yeah, it still was hectic. It's a bugger of a job. Even when you're adept and know what you're doing, you get slammed with a little bit of time to do almost an hour's worth of music. You're the one at the tail end of the system. We've got the sound stage booked for this day. We've got the studio booked for this day, and so we won't have a lot to edit until this day. And it all just got pushed down, which I've come to realize is the way that works all the time, and that's why all the big guys employ a whole boatload of people to do scores and cues for them. But it was a really hectic learning curve for sure.
Now, while you're working on the Ernest films, are you still performing and coming up with these different characters? Yeah, definitely. I still had a band off and on, and was still writing my own material. How did the Existo film come about? Some of those songs were songs that I performed in my rock and roll band, and like Hoop Hoop and a couple others, I think. The director who had originally employed me for the Ernest stuff was a frequent visitor whenever we would play out. So he dragged me into the TV show, and then he's the one that suggested to Buster Cherry, that he should hire me, and he didn't know any better. But all of those Existo songs were just songs that the director always liked, and so we just basically wrote a movie around the music. That's amazing, because those songs, they all feel, I guess because of you writing them, but they all feel of a piece, and they fit so well in the narrative of the story.
Well, good. That's definitely the goal.
The songs come first, the narrative comes second. The narrative is, I would say, pretty... I don't like the word subversive, but it's pretty subversive, especially at the political time. I mean, I have to say that it's as resonant today as it was in 1999, perhaps even more so. That was pretty cutting edge stuff. I don't imagine you guys were kind of thinking that this is going to be the next The English Patient or something.
No, we really didn't. We had so little time to shoot that it was, and we had so much music to do that everything was really on the fly. We had to be fast and nimble. We felt lucky that we got as much on the screen as we did.
Tell me about Jackie Welch. How did you meet her, and how did she come to be in Existo?
She sang in my band. Actually, I met her in that improv sketch group, Gonzo Theater, and she sang every now and then in the comedy context, and sang great. And so when I formed a band, I got her in it and a couple other women, and she and I would frequently put on wigs and dress up and do songs in other characters, and even do a section of the evening in character. And so I've been doing that kind of thing with her since the early 80s.
I have to ask about the hair. I don't imagine that was a wig.
Oh, no, it was me, actually. I think, the famous ballet russe director or impresario from Russia that had all the famous ballet stars in France, and so he was this larger than life character who hung out with Picasso and all of the surrealists, and Diaghilev was his name, and he had this streak of white going through his hair, and it was always just to me so dramatic and odd. So that's where that came from.
How did you first come to work with Jenny Littleton? Because I know you guys have gone on to do Doyle and Debbie for years and years afterwards.
Yeah. She auditioned. My ex-wife, who was also in the movie, in Existo, told me I should audition her for the ingenue. And so we did. Coke and I, the director, auditioned her. And she was really good, but there was one that we liked a little better, and we hired her. And then she quickly realized that it was a little blue, a little edgy, and I think she might have been a contemporary Christian artist at the time, and she just didn't know what she was do. And so we went back to Jenny, and then obviously it's the happiest accident that's ever happened, because we've been working together ever since. I think she's hilarious. You had asked about the politics of Existo. Coke and I are political junkies, and we've been best friends forever. And so we go on walks, and we still do. I'm going walking with him in the morning. And we just disgorge all of the rancid politics that are in our stream, so we can get rid of it and spew at each other, and then we're done, and we'll move on to more pleasant things. But so we're just in, veteran lefties and, socialists to the core. But we also, follow politics relentlessly and love the minutiae of it, and always make fun of both the right and the left equally. So that was kind of the goal, was, yeah, we're lefties, but honest to God, the lefties deserve skewering as much as the right, and because they're just so pathetic. And so we just combined all of the art movements, all of the political movements that we have enjoyed reading about and yammering about for years, and put them all in one big pot for Existo and his lefty gang. And then at that time, religious conservatism was a little more ascendant than it is now. And so, we put Glasscock in the front of it, but basically we did the same to the right. So there was certainly no message, obviously. It was just trying to have fun with both sides. That was it.
That's one of the things that I like about it is just you talked about how ineffectual the left is, and just that they choose to fight back with performance art and things like that, where it's just like, wow, okay. Yeah. But it all seems to be done very even-handedly, and also, at least when it comes to the left, a lot of love. That comes through.
That part was very affectionate. And, I mean, we had little inside names and things for people that were obscure artists that we had always enjoyed. And so, yeah, I mean, it was definitely a labor of love. And like you say, that at that time, there were, in the handful of reviews that we did get from local arts papers and indie papers, there were some that, offered, it might be pushing it a little too far, and then, of course, immediately after that, we didn't even come close to how far it went in reality. And so it's not really redemption, since it's such a ridiculous movie anyway, but nonetheless, it made us smirk about it.
I want to ask about your performance. You have such energy through so much of the film. How did you keep that up through all of the shooting?
With the music, it's easy, for sure. That's something I've been doing for a long time. I'm not an actor. I mean, I don't pretend to be. I don't go out and audition. I have no range to speak of. So, it was just make something up and infuse it with some energy. That was kind of it. And all of my friends that were in that, everybody that we cast, they're local theater people who work all year long, work their asses off. A lot of times I just fed off of them and learned from them. Because I'm basically a rock and roller pretending to act in Existo. But there were just so many fun characters around me that it made me feel like I could pull this off.
You talked a little bit about the notices that the film got. What kind of reception did it end up getting, both locally and then nationally?
We did, I'm not sure how many, maybe a dozen film festivals. And that's the exposure it got. That's the press it got. And people either hated it or loved it. There was very little ambivalence involved. It could have been more satisfying out on the road, but yet every now and then we'd hit a city where we were darlings for a weekend, and then it almost found a life at the end after the festival circuit, and but it didn't, and it crashed and burned through just very disappointing circumstances where we thought we were really close to having some major distribution. And then really it just, once that folded, we had to cut our losses and give our poor, long-suffering investors at least the ability to write off their investment. And so there it sits.
What did you do after Existo had kind of met its demise?
I wrote a theater piece, actually, a couple of them, just because we tried to get another movie going and realized that wasn't going to happen. And because Coke and I have written many screenplays together and worked together over the years. And so, we went back at it, had a couple of projects that we were pitching and going back and forth to Los Angeles. And then I guess my frustration led me back to the stage, and where I knew I could, I had a friend who had a little theater who I knew I could coerce into letting me have it for a couple of months. And that was the beginnings of Doyle and Debbie.
And then that seems to have been going strong for quite a while now. And just, you guys have been on Conan O'Brien. You've gotten just rave reviews. I remember when you were playing in Chicago, and that was, held over for a while. It just seems like that is going gangbusters. That's
been the most fun I've ever had in the show business. And Jenny has just been a riot. It was 10 years in June that we've been doing this. Yeah, she is totally steeped in country music, and her husband plays in the best band in town, plays upright bass, called the Time Jumpers. He's got this all-star Western swing band with Vince Gill as a sideman. They're just monstrous. And so she comes from that. And so a lot of the country music establishment have embraced us and, take it as an homage as much as a skewering, which is a real honor to us that nobody's offended, and yet we're doing exactly what we want to do and being as naughty as we want to be. So yeah, it's really been fun, and we're trying to get we're going out to Los Angeles in November to do a showcase out there because we've got a movie and a TV show we'd love to do. So we'll see.
Yeah, I seem to remember you guys did a Kickstarter. Was that for a movie project?
Yeah, it was. Yes, it was for music for a movie, which is one of the things that we're still trying to get off the ground. So yeah, and that's part of what sent me scurrying back to the stage. It's just so hard to get them done. They're so expensive that if nobody knows you outside of a few friends and Mike White, then it's hard to raise that kind of money. So we're having fun on this time. The journey is a blast. It's because we've gotten to travel some. Like you say, we did Chicago. We've been around the country just a little bit, but mostly as a music act, oddly enough, as opposed to a theatrical act. And so we generally these days are just playing music venues, and it suits us really well.
Have you recorded any music as Doyle and Debbie?
Yes, and I'll send you a CD as soon as we hang up.
Oh, I was going to say, where can people go to buy it?
Yeah, they can go to buy it. Go to doyleanddebbie.com, and there it is. I think it's on Amazon and iTunes and all those others too. But any way you want to go about it. But if you do get the CD, then it has a lovely little folder in there with a lot of great artwork and all of those incredibly clever lyrics.
If people are fans of the Existo music, is that available anyplace?
No, it's not. Oddly enough, it's not. But I think most of it's findable on YouTube. Someone posted the film on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm curious, since the film isn't available, when you see it available out on YouTube, is that all right by you, or do you get ticked by stuff like that?
It's kind of a wink and a nod, but the reason that there are no legal implications is that nobody's making any money. It just sits there. There are no ads or anything. So, yeah, I mean, we've never done that ourselves, just because we're always on the verge of it's never even received its just dues in post-production. It's never been color corrected. There are just a lot of issues that drive us crazy every time we see it. It's so dark that, and that needn't be. With just a little bit of digital processing, we can make it look very pretty but I'm sure we'll do that someday. I think I'll be in my late 80s, but we'll do it.
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been a real pleasure.
Likewise, Mike. Thanks.
At the crack of doom, it's a big long pipe bomb with a pink boom. It's a big voice rock with a little boy waddle. It's a kind of love thing with the full down drama. Love thing.
Were you always interested in film?
Yeah, I took a lot of film studies courses in college, but I was going to go to law school. And so I went to a little Midwestern liberal arts college and took film almost as literature. I had a great professor, but never thought of film production as a career until I didn't go to law school and ended up working for a photographer here in Nashville who introduced me to Coke Sam's and his partner back in the late 70s. And then I sort of got fascinated with it by from being on set, taking production stills, and then started working on film sets, and then ended up being a film editor for a long time. So it was kind of after college that I actually got interested in the actual filmmaking.
When you were doing production stills, what kind of productions were these?
Mostly commercials. Mostly commercials, a couple of sort of independent television pilot promo things, but it was just a way to kind of usefully be on set and start seeing what was going on. Oh, I think one of the guy I worked for, the photographer I worked for, we did a lot of work with Loretta Lynn, and we did some of the film production stills when she would visit the set of Coal Miner's Daughter back then. So all of that kind of infected me with this fascination with the film business.
And when you started doing some editing work, what kind of stuff were you cutting?
I was cutting a lot of documentaries, and sometimes they were documentaries for hire. It'd be like make a documentary for the Tennessee Department of Health and Human Services, So it's sort of documentaries, and then got into music videos and commercials, and then was an assistant editor on a couple of independent films. And then I got tired of being in a small, dark room all by myself.
How did you get into doing production work as far as actually being a producer?
I went into editing it was a fork in the road between going from being a production assistant to a production manager. I really wanted to get more into the filmmaking side of it, so I went in through editing. And this is all pretty much based in Nashville, so it was not, I didn't go to LA or to New York. I worked in New York some, but I didn't move there. And then through editing other people's mistakes, I decided I would rather be now back involved in the earlier stages of creating the projects. So I did some directing and then started producing more.
This whole time, are you working pretty regularly with Coke?
Off and on for quite a while. I had other jobs and other freelance jobs, and then eventually kind of settled into working a lot with the company he and Jim May had, and then actually ended up becoming a partner of that company.
Can you tell me about those early days when you were working on the Ernest films?
I didn't work on those as much as Coke did. I was second unit director on Ernest Goes to Jail, the one where Ernest becomes magnetic. And so after the first unit would shoot on the set all day, I would come in, me and a crew of about 10, and then we would do all of the paper clips and pins and anything metal flying out of the drawers that they cut away to stick to Ernest. And, this is back in the days where everything was done on film. So it was practical effects, and we'd shoot it in reverse. I did that, and then I was, I think, post-production supervisor on Ernest Goes to School. And I was post-production supervisor on the TV show. There was a one season of an episodic CBS Saturday morning show that we did that was Ernest, and it was all kinds of little skits, kind of, a kid's show.
I've been watching that this week, and it is so good. I can't believe it's so good.
It was a blast. It came on right after Pee-wee's Playhouse. When they first put it on, it kept getting bumped around because of SEC football Saturday morning. But it came on right after Pee-wee's Playhouse, and so from what I've heard from a lot of people, it was a stoner's dream of what to do on Saturday morning. Get kind of baked and watch Pee-wee and Ernest.
So what was your experience as far as Existo goes? How did that project kind of come about?
It was sort of at the end of all the Ernest stuff, and Bruce-Arntson had been involved in, I think he and co-wrote one of the Ernest movies, and then he did music composition for a lot of that. And he was just someone that was the most interesting and talented and funny person that any of us had ever met. And he had that character Existo, and he and Coke started developing it from being a kind of existential magician to this other character. At some point, we thought we could raise money and raise enthusiasm from crew people to make a movie with Bruce and his music, and with Coke directing, and I produced it, and Peter Curlin produced it with me. And so we started going out and pitching investors in Nashville, and damned if we didn't pull it off. I mean, it was sort of a children's crusade in a way.
I am amazed at just how good the production looks and how many people there are in it, because I don't imagine you were dealing with a very big budget.
No, we weren't dealing with a very big budget. I can't remember exactly how much cash we had, but everyone deferred something. The weird thing was, this is sort of like the socialist in us all. It was an all-union production. It was Writers Guild, Directors Guild, IA, SAG, and AF&M. And we signed union contracts with all the unions. And, you know, even though the crew wasn't getting paid very much, they were getting a little bit towards their health insurance. And that, you know, and part of the message of the movie is very much in that realm. And, you know, Bruce was writing it and acting in it, and we wanted him to get health insurance as well. So we did it that way, and it made it a lot easier at that point to sign people on, because we got some of the really good crew and some good actors because we were, you know, working under a contract. And that was the late 70s. It's a little different now, but at that point it was, you know, we had an up-and-running production company in Nashville that employed actors and crew people on a regular basis, and so and we always treated people fairly and paid them on time. So there was a whole lot of goodwill towards the production in Nashville, and Bruce was kind of a darling of the art scene, and all the actors really loved him and respected him. So, you know, it was a great coming together of a lot of people in the film business. And it had been a long time since there'd been kind of a homegrown film effort made. It was before there was a whole lot of film being done in Nashville. It was one of those dry times. So it was kind of a perfect storm for pulling it off. And we had people turned out like crazy to be extras. We tried to feed everyone well. We'll work for food.
What were some of your biggest challenges on that one?
Working with a really low budget is always a challenge, especially when you have high aspirations. And then some people were doing their job for the very first time. You know, you're sort of letting people work up in their craft, and so it wasn't always the smoothest, but we had lots of seasoned pros, and we shot it on film. So on a low budget, doing an entirely film post-production was, I think we cut on an Avid and then matched back to film. And so I think the whole post-production was the biggest challenge, just with limited resources and the challenge of marrying new technology and old technology at the time. The shoot itself was, we were able to find a warehouse where we could build all of our sets. So we didn't have much moving around. We weren't out in the world very much. We were kind of in our own little clubhouse. And that helped a lot because we didn't have a transportation department. And the few times we went out on location, it was a little bit of a thrash. For the most part, it was a pretty harmonious, happy shoot.
Was there ever anything that you guys wanted to do that just wasn't in the cards as far as the amount of money that you had in the budget?
You know, a lot of it would have been having more shooting days to really be able to light more and have, you know, more takes and not have to. I mean, we shot it pretty quickly. I think what you see on screen, we shot in 3 weeks. We shot another week. We had like 20 minutes before the film starts now of a bunch of stuff that we ended up totally cutting out. A lot of backstory and following Existo and Maxine before they arrived back. And it was some really funny bits, but you end up going, all right, we need to get right into the story and the music. So, but yeah, I think if we'd had another week, if we could have afforded to shoot another week, it would have been great.
Yeah, because it seems like there's at least 2 versions of it out there right now that I can find. One where it kind of rolls right into it with like a news broadcast or a radio news broadcast, and then there's another one that starts with, why am I forgetting the crossdresser's name? But it starts with a whole musical number with her.
Yes, Do Me.
Right. Oh God, I love that song.
Then there was actually one before that never got finished to film. So, yeah, the one that started out with Colette, that was Gailard Sartain played Colette. That one was the one that was the theatrical release. It played at the film festivals. You know, we did that, and then we came back and took that out and put another intro on. But then there's yet another version that we never actually completely finished. Somewhere that vault footage exists. Maybe we'll reissue it on some anniversary. I'm not sure which one.
How was the film received when it came out?
It depended on where you were. It was a film that people either loved or hated. And I guess that is a better place to be than just coolly indifferent. But LA Independent Film Festival, we were a midnight showing, and I think we had the most people there for the midnight show thus far in the history of that film festival. We played in Vancouver as part of their sort of fringe festival at the Vancouver Film Festival, and they loved us. San Francisco loved us. Chicago loved us. We played at the Hamptons Film Festival, and for some reason, and I don't know why this was, a lot of very elderly people came to that showing, and you could hear their walkers and oxygen tanks clanking as they fled out the aisle after the first 20 minutes. And for the Q&A, I remember this lady said, I just have one question to ask you all. Why, with all that talent, would you make a film like this? And it was Coke, and Bruce and I were standing up there going sort of like, well, at least you think we have talent. So, and you know, there are still people. I mean, there's a passionate sort of underground fan base. But it was either you liked it and got it and appreciated it, or you thought it was terrible. My parents didn't quite know what to think.
Now, did the film do anything for you? Did it help open any doors or anything?
Yeah, it did, because we got to go on the festival circuit, and it taught us all a lot. It taught us a lot about making a film from the ground up, you know, raising money and putting it together and being in charge of other people's investments. It taught us a lot about distribution and how key that is and how hard that is. We fell prey to the prevailing sort of consensual mythology of independent filmmakers of the time of, yeah, and we'll go to Sundance and everyone will love it and we'll get distribution and we'll make a multiple of our money back and everything will be fine. And when that didn't happen, we didn't have a plan B. So we worked really hard to try and get distribution. And I still have contacts in the distribution business from people who really liked Existo. They just didn't have a place for it in their company. A guy I still pitch things to at he's now at Lionsgate. So, it did a lot. I tell you, the thing that has opened the doors for Coke and myself has been Ernest. I mean, because that was something that was a phenomenon that actually made a lot of money. Hollywood still respects that. But Existo really was sort of a late life film school experience.
I had read that there was supposed to be a Son of Ernest film. Was there any truth to that?
Yes, we're pitching it right now. We're not calling it Son of Ernest anymore because we originally were calling it Son of Ernest, and we have talent provisionally attached to a great one that I can't really say it publicly because he's not really attached because we won't be able to get him signed up until we have funding. But people are really excited about the package. But everyone, what they ended up wanting was more of a new Ernest movie, So the guy is Son of Ernest. He's not trying to be, he's not trying to do a Jim Varney impersonation but it's more like the new Ernest. So hopefully that will be coming, and hopefully it will be, it's for like a lot of the people, and most of the fans of Ernest were boys. My 3 nephews loved it, and they're all in their late 20s, 30s, and have kids. Are starting to have kids of their own, and that's kind of who we're trying to appeal to. Is kids who loved it as kids, and now they have kids.
I know as a producer, you kind of have to have a lot of irons in the fire. What are some of the other stuff that you're working on and hoping to get bites on?
We're working on bruce-arntson's new project. He's got a long-running, absolutely hysterical musical show called The Doyle and Debbie Show. And all I can say is just Google The Doyle and Debbie Show. It's been playing here for 8 years. He did a run at the Royal George Theater for about 8 months up in Chicago. And we've been trying to get an little independent movie off the ground with it, but we're actually thinking it may be a kind of cool episodic thing. But it's Bruce's twisted and unique sense of musical humor turned onto the country music world. And we've optioned and are working on optioning a couple of books and have another episodic pitch we're making that's based on a true life drug smuggling cartel out of Tennessee.
Never knew such a thing existed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I thought y'all were about clean living down there.
Well, we are, but we know some people who aren't. So we're, you have to keep a lot of things up in the air. So I'm amazed that people are still talking about Existo. Well,
I kind of figure in this political climate, it seems to really hit home, Yeah,
I think there ought to be a double bill of Idiocracy and Existo.
Yes.
Let's just take a break from the harsh realities and go into fantasy land.
Just do me. I'm too damn tired and frail to fight. Just do me. I know that savage appetite. You see me like the little lamb entangled in the vines. Stop this morbid ceremony. I can see your pheromony. Do me. You can dispense with protocol. Just do me. It's so sadistic when you stall. It's obvious you only pause to wrestle with your thoughts. Cast aside your common sense. I'll accept the consequence. Just do me. Yes, my form is less than svelte. So sue me. This is the hand that I've been dealt. Can that touchy-feely crap about the girl inside? If I were a flower you pluck me, I ain't moving till you...
All right, we are back, and we are talking about Existo. So as you heard in the interviews and what we talked a little bit about earlier is there's a huge connection between this film and the Ernest movies and the Hey Vern, It's Ernest show, and even all the way back to the Ernest commercials. And I think that all three of us are pretty much old enough to remember those Ernest commercials and what a phenomenon those were. And it's so unusual that somebody can be in a commercial. I mean, I know Stephen the Dell guy, they were talking about giving him a series before, he ended up smoking a joint and, getting thrown in jail for the rest of his life. But, other than like the Geico caveman, I mean, there's very rare instances where somebody can take a character from a commercial and actually parlay it into pretty much a whole career. And not to say that Jim Varney was limited by his acting abilities with the Ernest character, but that's just the thing that struck that nerve and really jettisoned him into the limelight. I mean, I actually used to look forward to seeing those Ernest commercials play up here in Michigan when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's weird because I thought it was like a Southern thing because those guys were all from Tennessee and I grew up in Texas. And so we would see those because they would do them for our local news channel. And I would see the Ernest commercials, but then I was looking through YouTube and then he was doing stuff for places in Northern California. So those guys were out there with the Ernest character. Did you guys have those out in Baltimore?
I know I saw them every now and then, but I think the first time I saw him was on like an evening magazine type show where it was a story about how this guy has created this character and he's doing commercials that are shown all over the country. And that was my introduction to him as far as I know. And then maybe like in the years after that, gradually I would start seeing him pop up in commercials. I
think what they did a lot was a lot of what we call in the industry would call donut spots, where they would record the beginning and end and then have a spot in the middle where you could drop in like your local offer. Mm-hmm. So you would talk about whatever kind of refrigerator and then finish it up with the joke basically. And in the middle, they would drop in this thing about like, get your new refrigerator over at Ollie Fredder this week, blah, 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 blah. And of course, that's one of the smartest things to do because then you can take that commercial and send it to all of these different places around the country and everybody is able to use it. But then, looking at some of those YouTube clips, it seems like some of those are very specific to regions because there were some things where he was talking about you don't have to go over to here to buy a keg. This type of beer comes in a can, and I'm just like, well, I've never heard of that beer in my life. And so I'm thinking it's maybe like a Yingling or a Natty Boh or something where it's much more regional than you would advertise Budweiser nationally, but there are some beers where it's just a regional beer.
You mean the rest of you don't have Natty Boh? Lucky you.
Or Yingling.
I'm reenacting my trip through Pittsburgh into Baltimore last time. Just, where do I stop? What do I get?
To go off on a slight beer tangent here. So as you know, over in the States there, the hipsters are all drinking the Pabst Blue Ribbon. I take it. Yeah, well, the hipsters over here in the UK try to do the same thing, but they have to import Pabst Blue Ribbon. So to the hipsters to drink a Pabst Blue Ribbon over here, I think it winds up being about $15 for a 6-pack. It's like
holy shit!
Yeah, it's like 2 or 3 pounds for a bottle.
And the whole reason to drink it here was that it was the cheapest.
Yeah, it was cheap. When we filmed The Collegians Ago, there's a scene. We paid everybody in beer, and I remember us buying a case, which was 24 PBRs for like $7.
Don't drink that beer, Ted.
That's right.
So Ernest became this phenomenon where he ended up having a Saturday morning TV show, and I finally went back and watched that after talking to Coke Sam's and Bruce-Arntson, and wow, it was terrific.
There's some good stuff.
I couldn't get over how good it was.
Yeah, there's some good stuff. Like I remember it. So I remember actually, that's probably when I was in college, and I would still go watch it and go, "This is kind of fun." I mean, like especially when he played the baby with the
yes, yeah, and it was great to see just all the different characters that he had because I remember like what was it, Dr. Otto and the Gloom Beam or whatever, and And I remember the character from that, and then to see that character show up in other things, and just the aunt character, the baby character, all these different things that he was able to pull off, and then these other characters that the actors that we see in Existo are playing as well. It was just like, wow, this is really put together well, and it moved so quickly. In the interviews, they brought up the Pee-wee's Playhouse, and I can really see that as far as this being kind of right there in that mold, or like right there with like a Beekman's world. It just had this kind of anarchic spirit to it, but at the end, it really comes together really well.
Let's not forget there was a character on the show called Existo.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I, of course, am the great Existo, the conspicuous. And magic can be a really wonderful and relaxing hobby that anyone can do. And so let me just start you out on a really simple little magic trick. First, I'm going to pull a scarf out of my hand. Just reach in like so, and sometimes it tends to get a little hung up in there. Whoa! Thank you! Thank you very much!
I remember the bigger guy. I remember him from being on. He plays the Colette. Was that
Colette Watchuwill?
Yeah, I remember him from being on, and I think he's in a couple of the movies too.
I want to say his name is Gailard Sartain, but I'm not sure if I've got the pronunciation correct. I was really happy to go back and watch these, and to see Existo as this existential magician, and then I want to say it's even Bruce. Is it Bruce singing the theme song to Hey Vern?
I think so. I watched a couple episodes, and Bruce definitely pops. So there's one episode where it's definitely Bruce singing as the moon, and the moon is tired of doing its job. I'm like, I can completely hear Bruce there, and I mean, I know he did a lot of the music. Maybe he did all the music and songs for the show. So I mean, his stamp is definitely all over that series.
And eventually, Ernest would get into a lot of films, and that was kind of there's a whole series. I don't remember how many of those that they did, but it's funny because like all of a sudden the tide turned, and even though Ernest was incredibly popular and popular enough to be in all of these movies, people just pissed all over them. Like they were like a punchline for so many years. I mean, it's the same kind of punchline that like an Adam Sandler film gets today, but I think Adam Sandler gets it for good reason, and I don't think that Ernest got it for a good reason, because those films are genuinely funny.
I remember working in a video store in the early 90s and watching his movies at work, and some of them seemed aimed at little kids. I mean, it just seemed like they were dumbed down. But then some of them, I remember getting into arguments with my coworkers. There were some, and I wish I could remember which ones. I want to say either Ernest Scared Stupid or Ernest Goes to Jail, where I was saying, if I changed the credits so that it said this was directed by the Coen brothers, you would love this film, because it seemed like Raising Arizona. It had the same kind of style to it. And I finally got people to actually like watch these films with a more open mind and admit that, oh yeah, some of these films are actually really funny.
Yeah, I had a friend tell me the same thing. A guy that who actually recently I'll go ahead and out him. He won an Emmy. He works on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, and he was one of the first people to tell me. He was like, he directs the Jimmy Kimmel Show now, and he's the one that told me, dude, watch the first couple of movies. The other ones maybe not so much, but the Scared Stupid and the Goes to Jail were pretty funny.
Well, yeah, and it's the same guys that are working on Existo that are working on these films, and so yeah, I think you told me, Skizz, kind of like how Genevieve told you, like, these are the guys that did the Ernest movies, and I was just like, oh, okay, because they were like punchlines. And yeah, looking at, Bruce was in Ernest Goes to Jail and Ernest Goes to School, and it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is pretty cool. They work, man. It's like, the people that make fun of the Jerry Lewis films, not having sat down and watched, The Bellboy and Ladies Man and Nutty Professor. It's just like, okay, yeah, Which Way to the Front, those kind of movies, like, yeah, you can probably keep those, slapstick of another kind. But when it comes to some of those early ones, I mean, these are brilliant things. And I totally feel that these Ernest films really got short shrift, and people really need to go back and look at the good ones.
I'm thinking maybe a revival. You think along maybe that, some Ernest and Existo?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, all right. Sounds good, like a double bill. That'd actually be a pretty good one. They all started together in the commercials, and then they did the TV show, and then they did the movies, and then that's actually pretty cool that they just went and said, we're going to do something really, really crazy like this. And we're able to just kind of switch gears like that and, just kind of take their money, I guess. Or how did they, how'd that go about getting financed, that movie? Did they do it or?
It wasn't a big backing, and it was a pretty cheap movie, but yeah, it was a lot of people kind of pitching in together to make it happen.
So it's mostly that set. It's mostly the sewer is most of it.
Other than the guy on television, other than that house, I mean, you don't leave the sewer too often.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I guess that restaurant scene, that's about it.
Yeah, the restaurant, yes.
So let's go ahead. We're going to take another break and play an interview with Justin-Lloyd, the author of The Importance of Being Earnest, The Life of Actor Jim Varney, Stuff That Vern Doesn't Even Know. Wow, that's a title. And we'll be back with that right after this.
Hey, Vern, today's your lucky day. We knew you wouldn't want to oversleep, Vern. We only do it once a week, Vern. Me and all the other guys, Vern. We even brought the pies, Vern. It's the ernest-p-worrell with a story and a moral and a big chuckle, hip trip, double dip, super show. You know what I mean? No! Hey, Vern, we moved your furniture and now we're gonna fire up the barbecue, Vern. We owe it all to you, Vern. But now you gotta move, Vern. Hey, Vern! Hey, Vern! Hey, Vern, it's me. I'm on TV.
My name is Justin-Lloyd. I work at Lexmark here in Lexington in kind of like a help desk job, like an IT job.
Now, had you written anything before you wrote The Importance of Being Earnest?
No. It was one of those things where my mother and my aunt, two of his older sisters, had talked about writing a book for a long time, and they got some things put down on paper, and but just never really moved forward from there. And I just had made up my mind one day that I was going to write a book no matter what it took.
Now, Jim Varney was your uncle. What was it like growing up with him as an uncle?
It was pretty crazy. I didn't see him a whole lot. I mean, when at my early childhood in the 70s, he was out in California, and then he moved to Nashville in the early 80s. So he was at least close. He was home a lot for a lot of holidays, and he would still visit quite often. I often ask myself what it would be like, how I would have maybe seen him differently if he wasn't famous, and because he was just kind of unusual and entertaining and everything, and he was just always was always standing room only, when he was at our house. He was just constantly entertaining, teaching you something.
And what was it like the first time you ever saw him on television?
It was pretty cool. I'm trying to remember. I think it was a local commercial here, Convenient Food Mart. It was probably when I was in maybe third grade. I just remember it being, really neat to see your uncle on TV, and pretty far back. I don't remember a lot of specific memories, but I just remember it being, pretty neat thing to see.
Would you say you got guilted into doing the project, or that you kind of finally embraced it and said, somebody's got to do this, so I'm going to be the one?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination of things, I believe, because on one hand, I was his family, and I knew certain things about him that really nobody else did. I didn't, of course, know him as well as my mom and my aunt. I felt like I would be able to put together the research and put together the hours of the research that needed to be done, going through, magazines and newspapers and really be able to commit myself to that part of it. And so I realized that I was one of maybe the few people that can maybe do such a project, because you either had family that was maybe either almost too biased because they knew him so well, And then you had people that worked with him that didn't know any of the family stuff. And I don't know how open the family would have been to certain other people that, would have been writing a book. So I was just kind of perfectly in between the two and felt that because I knew him, but in a more limited role than being a sibling, that I wouldn't have the bias and so forth. They had certain feelings about him being earnest and feeling like that kind of hurt his overall career and certain things like that. And other things that I think would have really, I don't know, I wouldn't say hurt the book, but it would have kind of limited the overall kind of scope of things maybe. On YouTube, I was seeing these videos, so many videos people were putting up there of him, and I even put a couple out there myself. And some of the comments were just so glowing, and people talking about Ernest being their hero. And that really struck me because, I never saw, I don't think a lot of people would see Ernest as your classic hero type, like Superman. And that really struck me, and I really felt that I wanted to put something out there that was substantial, that his fans could really sink their teeth into, that they would really enjoy, because I could see that they were, longing for more of him, and obviously there's no more of them out there, unfortunately. So it was definitely, an adventure and something I'm just very happy that I undertook.
Tell me more about your adventure. How did you decide to do your research? Did you start with family first or Hollywood folk, or how did you go about doing that?
I was just kind of all over the place. I just sat down and just started, I'm trying to remember, I think I was starting to just go through a lot of magazines or magazines, newspapers, everything that I could find online, and getting every kind of database. At one point, I took a trip to Nashville at the downtown Nashville library and was able to pull up some old articles from the Nashville Banner and the Tennessean, and that was a lot of good information. One of the craziest bits of luck really was an online newspaper. There was a comment left by somebody that ended up being an old friend and girlfriend of his named Julianne Pogue. She got me in touch with Jim's friend and former manager his name is Joe Lyles. And this was somebody I knew of that hardly anybody else would have known of, and I knew him from my mom and my aunt. He was kind of a family friend as well. But he had moved to California, and he was very much kind of off the grid, and I would have never been able to get in touch with him. I would just never been able to find him without speaking to Julianne. And he was an extremely integral part of my book and made it the kind of book I had really hoped to make it. And I'm just very indebted to him. I imagine myself almost like an investigator, and you're just going through every possible lead, and some of those little leads would just open up the door to something that was really substantial. So I just was almost every day for probably 6 years, I was working on this thing out of my mind at some point sometimes. I mean, I just really was so super focused on it that it just became, almost an obsession, I would say.
I imagine, yeah. I mean, it can be easy to go down different rabbit holes and I had never known until reading your book that there was a Johnny Cash connection with Jim-Varney.
And I didn't know to the extent of that connection myself until I really was talking to Joe Lyles. And Joe was able to tell me in depth of all these little stories that I kind of knew about from my mom and my aunt that they only heard bits and pieces of. And I just knew these little bits of it for all these years. And he was able to tie all this together, how they got to California and what brought them back and all this. And it's so nice to hear all, get all that. Yeah, it's crazy all the people like Johnny Cash that he knew throughout his life. It was really something.
You didn't leave a stone unturned to read about those early performances, when he was on the Dinah Shore show. And even, God, I loved Pink Lady when I was growing up. So nobody ever writes about Pink Lady.
Yeah. And I think I had a really good editor because I was just gathering all these facts, and I didn't want it to read just like as a book of facts. I needed to, tie it together and make it sound like something that was readable and enjoyable and so forth. And I think she did a good job in helping me. And because, I gather a lot of information that can become kind of boring, I guess, at some point.
Well, it's just remarkable that he could take a character that was, he was selling everywhere and selling so many different things. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, just how far his reach was.
It was kind of crazy because everybody just thought that he was in their town and their part of the country. And they didn't realize everybody in the country thought this way. I thought my book would be a good kind of research for somebody that was in advertising because, what they did had really never been done before. And just from an advertising perspective, I think my book would be a pretty interesting read to just find out, how they did all that and what their thinking was behind, going viral the way they did before that was, ever even a term.
It was like lightning in a bottle that there were so few stations, and so his commercials would make such an impact. You talking about how a station would broadcast when the Ernest commercials were showing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
To be able to parlay that into the career that he ended up having and all of those feature films and a television show, that's just remarkable. There are so few things that really I've ever seen a commercial character like that go into all these things and succeed so much. I could think about like the Geico Cavemen where they're on TV for an episode or two and get canceled.
Right.
But, Ernest had such staying power.
Yeah. Especially those first 4 movies, I think a lot of people kind of set those apart usually when talking about all of those, really the production value and everything in those. It was really something. I think they were really, really good movies. You can look at Ernest, too, a little bit differently, I suppose, as, the kind of the movie Ernest compared to, the commercial Ernest, where obviously the movies are geared more toward the children. And the commercials had a little wider range, and maybe it's humor. I wouldn't say adult humor, but humor that would be more for the wider demographic and so forth. And so, and he could maybe be a little more obnoxious in the commercials and so forth. So I know there's some people I've become friends with to do a podcast, this Ernest podcast, and they really delve deep into kind of these types of things about the commercial Ernest and the movie Ernest, and it's the depths they get into makes me feel almost like I was kind of lacking the night in the book that put me to shame sometimes, I feel like, but pretty neat.
Now, was there any problem with him playing the Ernest character so often? Did he kind of get typecast into that, or was it easy for him to break out of that role?
I think for him it was. It was just obviously for other people to see him. That's the thing, for other people to see him differently. I think he realized when they did the first, Ernest Goes to Camp with the Disney, that is going national, and that could really seal his fate in some ways. And it's hard to say how much it really affected, this is one thing you really don't know. You go back in time, and if you never made that movie, I don't know how do things change? Because in some ways it opened up the door for other Disney type jobs for him. But then on other aspects, I don't know. It's really tough because, he still was able to get certain roles, like the Jed Clampett and Beverly Hillbillies and, some other things. He was on some episodes of Roseanne and Toy Story, which I think still came from the Disney connections through Ernest and so forth. So it's tough. I don't know. And that's the thing I discuss a little bit in my book about it. At some point, he wanted to break away, but he just kind of kept falling back into it. And that's in a way that's understandable. If you just sit back and just say, well, he should just stop this and do that. But it's another thing to really do that. And he was getting into his late 30s and so forth. And then just to try to do something kind of drastic is, I don't know, it's easier said than done, I suppose. He definitely had a comfortable existence living in just outside of Nashville there. And he liked where he lived. And I don't know how much he was really willing to try to give up to try again when he had kind of come up short in his first real big attempt, in the late 70s when he was out in California for about 5 years there. So I don't know. I wish he was around that I could talk to some more about these things. I found myself many times when, wanting to, the more and more I'd find out about him, the more I'd want to ask him questions. And of course he wasn't around to do that. So
what were some of the more surprising things that you found when you're doing your research?
The things like the Johnny Cash, some of the famous people I didn't know, with Freddie Prinze, how good of friends he became with Freddie Prinze, and even Steve Martin he got to know pretty well from the Johnny Cash show. Then one of the craziest things too that kind of led me on a whole different path was this some of the genealogy research I did for the Varneys, and to find out I didn't know that we were so closely related to the Hatfield family, and that was really something. And I even put a little bit of a family tree in the book to show that. That really got me interested in genealogy as well, and just more about his struggles, in California, and having respect for what he went through, his journey, and how he came back to Lexington here and was really about ready to give up on acting altogether, and until this Ernest opportunity came about.
Well, it seems like through Ernest, and please don't let me put words in your mouth, but it feels like he was able to help other people out rather than just himself when it came to the Ernest character, because he had so many actors that I saw in those films that would come back time and again. Yeah,
that, and somebody, and I forget who spoke at his memorial service and talked about how so many people in other parts of the movie business, whether set designers, stunt people, and how much work that he had been able to offer them through his career, and how many people owed their careers to him, and they really did a lot there for the movie industry in Nashville, and I'm sure a lot of actors got their start in a lot of these Ernest movies. And
was there ever any problem as far as the Ernest character kind of being like this? I don't know. He was, for lack of a better term, very earnest, but at the same time, he could have been considered like a quote-unquote dumb hick. Did anybody give him shit for that kind of thing?
That he's making fun of people, Appalachian-type people, you're saying? Is that...
Right. Were there any people who are just like, hillbilly rights, this is unfair. How dare he make his living off of making fun of us?
I don't think so, because in so many ways he was one of them, and being from Kentucky and so forth. And because most people I think either know he's from Kentucky or they think he might be from Nashville, which is still the South. And then, not that I ever had heard of him. That's a very good question, because I know I'd thought the same thing. And I'm sure certain people probably felt that way, but I've never heard of him, getting any flack for it. But I'm sure some did, that he's just making fun of the Southerners and in some of the stereotypical behavior and so forth. But I guess you could say that he was still just a beloved character, I guess, like, Ernest T. Bass or, other types like that. And then, of course, like I said, finding out that he's so close related to the Hatfields, and he was definitely more of an Appalachian person than even he realized, maybe. So,
did you manage to reach your goal when it came to what you wanted to do? Were your family, were they happy, and were you happy with the book when it came out? Yeah, I was. I mean, I think I read through it now occasionally, and I think I could have done better. But I mean, on certain things, that's mostly just in the writing, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like I was able to really find out as much as I could have dreamed to, and really provide a story that I'd hoped he would have been happy with and proud of, and present him in a way that it was as close to who he was, as I could. That was just, I thought, fair and not always everything was, glowing and everything. I mean, I talked about some of the struggles and some of his foibles, maybe?
Yes, I suppose, right. it was kind of easy for me not to be really biased because I wasn't as close to some of these people. So I could almost sit back as I was some kind of just regular reporter in certain instances is writing about these things. I felt like this, like I said, that gave me an advantage, and hopefully the book was better off, for that.
What has been the response to the book?
It's been mostly positive. A lot of that I take is that he was so beloved, and I don't look at any positive review on Amazon and think that I'm some great writer. I think more of that is reflected in the fact that he was just a beloved person, and that I think, and for the most part, I satisfied a lot of their curiosity about who he was, and they were able to find out a lot of the things that they wondered about him. Maybe that makes me happy that probably really aimed it for the Ernest fans, probably more than anybody, I would say. But I mean, of course, it goes over his entire life, and I mean, I would hope that any fan of Jim Varney, no matter what you were a fan of in his career, that you'd be satisfied, when you read the book. But obviously, I do realize that so many of his fans are fans of the character, so I really did everything I could to research that part of his life and just how this came to be, and everything that made Ernest as special a character and as enduring a character as he was.
After a while, he pretty much retired from live action and just strictly was doing voice work. Was that due to his health?
I don't believe so. I don't know if it's just more about those roles are being offered, and I don't know either, how lucrative they may have been and how it really compared to a normal acting role. For the most part, I know he did have to do traveling, of course, like Toy Story. He did have to travel out to California when he did the voice work. Yeah, I'm not really sure why he was, and I don't know that, like I said, that he was just getting so popular with that. And that was a way, I suppose, when you're typecast, that's one way you can keep going. I mean, I guess one thing that comes to mind is like Mark Hamill, that, gosh, he's had such a huge career in voice work that I don't think he would have been. I don't know if he would have been able to find the same work as an actor because of, I would think, being typecast. I don't know what.
What is your favorite role of his?
My favorite role would be from the Family album. I don't know if you've seen that. Probably the Lloyd Worrell, the meanest man in the world. From that, I saw that when they actually had it on TV here when I was a kid. I was probably about 12. And that really, all that just kind of blew me away. I'd seen him as Ernest, but seeing him do all these different roles, and that was really something to see. That, wow, what a real immense talent that he was. These are characters he'd been doing for quite a long time, early stand-up and so forth. But yeah, he was definitely a favorite.
Well, Justin Lloyd, thank you so much for your time tonight. I appreciate this.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
We are back and we are discussing Existo. So we talked a little bit about the festival cut versus the non-festival cut, or as Skizz calls them, the VHS cut versus the DVD-R cut. Both of them have a lot of merits. I like both of them, but to your point, Skizz, I kind of wish that somebody would come in and make one master version. And I think that both of them play really well. I think that the non-festival cut, the DVD-R cut, does a nice job of world building through that radio broadcast and showing us the kind of flashbacks to Existo getting the shock treatment. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't actually see that in the other version, right?
No, it's just sort of alluded to, but vaguely.
All told, there's 7 minutes worth of difference. I would say most of that is the beginning. I was trying to line them up to play them side by side last night, and my VLC player just kept lagging. I think I was doing too much other stuff, but I went through and I would kind of check them as we went through and say, I don't know if I remember this, and I would look at the other cut, and sure enough, it would be there. So I kept tricking myself, thinking that I was seeing stuff that I hadn't seen before. But really, it seems like the credits and the opening credits seem to be the biggest difference.
I watched the VHS cut, and then I kind of scanned through the DVD-R cut to see what differences I could notice. And unless there's other scenes that are missing from the DVD-R cut, it's pretty much the same movie except for the first 7 minutes and the closing credits.
So let me, as somebody coming into this kind of with a fresh face, not the fans like you two guys are. So I saw the one with the flash at the beginning. I thought the radio broadcast was a good setup, so I kind of knew what I was getting into there. And then the scenes of, so I had no idea that was, now it's all making sense. That was Existo who was getting the shock treatment or whatever that was.
Yeah.
Okay, but then do they address that in the movie or?
Vaguely. I mean, the story, if I've got it correctly, is that Maxine, Existo, and Rupin were very tight. Rupin sold them out, and Glasscock got his hands on. Glasscock basically captures Existo and gives him shock therapy, but he escapes, and he and Maxine go underground for about 10 years. In the first cut, they're just arriving at the sewer to come back to the underground. And in the second cut, in the DVD-R cut, they're already back. They're upstairs, taking the bath. All
right.
Before we get the first swing the bishop.
Swing the bishop. Okay, I did like to swing the bishop.
I'm curious as far as Rupin selling them out and how much of that is Maxine and him having this very public argument to set up that they hate each other versus maybe what really happened. I'm curious as far as that goes, because we do find out at the end of the film that Rupin has been working with them this whole time, and this whole idea of bringing Glasscock to the sewer and them turning him into a pig, which is fantastic. That has all been this kind of master plan. So I'm curious how far back that plan goes and when they made that plan together, because it is a nice surprise at the end of the film when he sits up from the back seat and they're all three together, and it feels like, the world is great for about 5 seconds before you see the flaming frogs.
Yeah, okay. So if I could interject here again. So this was really weird, is that I keep getting packages from my hall neighbor. So I've got like 3 packages in the hall. So the delivery guy came so it's like right when they were in the car, right? And then right when Existo woke, he's in the back seat, right? Or is it? No, the other.
It's Rupin in the back seat.
But when it starts out, he's asleep. Existo's asleep in the front seat, right?
Right.
Yeah. And then something that's literally when I had to get up and go to the door. So I missed something. Like, what was the reveal there? That was
There's 2 reveals. One is that they're on the outskirts of town and Rupin is with them, and then the next reveal is that the road is blocked by burning frogs.
Yes. What? Okay. So there was no mention of frogs before that, or was I?
Earlier, I think it's one of Glasscock's broadcasts. He says something about burning frogs on the outskirts of town.
Oh, okay.
And one of the artists actually says, did he just say burning frogs? And she gets shushed. And I think that was like the script's way of drawing attention to the burning frogs so it'll make sense in the film.
If people see that and they don't remember, I can completely understand, because it is it's not a throwaway line, but it is something that if you're not really paying, it took me until at least the second time until I was like, oh, there's where the line was. I was okay with just burning frogs on the outskirts of town without remembering the line the first time.
Yeah, it was just a perfectly normal ending for you. That was fine.
Oh, yeah.
And then with Reuben being there, then they were saying those guys are all kind of working together.
Well,
that's what I think.
It's funny because I hadn't thought of how you just described it, Mike. I hadn't thought that this was like a setup all along. I kind of figured Rupin did sell them out and he was working with Glasscock, and then maybe he's finally felt guilt and he's come back to the underground. And it could just be that he always wants to be on whichever side is winning. So maybe that's how he makes up his mind. But the last we see him is in the sewer as Maxine and Existo are leaving, and he and Existo share that look, And then in the next shot, he has apparently left with them. And I was thinking, okay, so between those two scenes, he had a change of heart.
I can see both of them being right. So I'm not going to say that my interpretation is the only one that makes sense. So I can definitely see where he is this, I described him before as a brown noser, and that it would make sense for him to always want to be on that winning side. At the same time, I'm like, well, was he the one that kind of manipulated Glasscock into doing this whole prodigal son thing and, allowing for the finale to take place or not? And I think both of them can coexist. I think both of them seem to be. So you're okay by me, Skizz.
All right.
Okay, that's all good to me. I'll take your word for it.
Since Existo came out, bruce-arntson has continued to work with the woman that plays Penelope, Jenny Littleton, and they're doing an act called Doyle and Debbie, which, as far as I remember, has been on both the older incarnation of Conan O'Brien and the current incarnation of Conan O'Brien's show, which is just called Conan now. People might know their act, but you've actually seen it. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, they do it. Actually, I don't know if they do it every Tuesday at this old roadhouse on the outskirts of Nashville. I've seen it twice, both times at this old roadhouse, but I know that they were also doing it in other cities and that they've now franchised it out to other actors to play the roles of Doyle and Debbie. But it is an amazing show. It's like dinner theater, except you're going to a roadhouse, and the show you're going to see is this sort of washed up legendary country duo who have fallen so far that they're now playing at these roadhouses on the outskirts of town. And it just happens to be on the anniversary of Doyle's father's death, I think. And what unplays throughout the show, like the second time I saw the film, already knowing what the show was about, I still felt like what I was seeing, it was the first time it had ever happened. And of course, it's actually like the 1,000th time it's happened. They pull it off so well, and they make it seem so spontaneous. But it is really just one of the funniest live shows I've ever seen. The song lyrics are hysterical. The story that's woven through it, the whole history of Doyle and Debbie. I mean, at some point he points out that, I'm Doyle and, this is my third Debbie. I can't even describe it. It's one of those shows that you just have to go and see it because it's like Existo. Every other line will have you laughing out loud.
Yeah, I don't know why I missed them when they were in Ann Arbor a few years ago. I still kind of kick myself for that. I did help fund the Kickstarter, so hopefully a Doyle and Debbie movie will be coming along pretty soon.
Yeah, I think that's probably what we're going to, in hopes of an Existo sequel, I think the closest thing we're going to get is a Doyle and Debbie movie, which I cannot wait to see.
All right, we're going to take a break and play a preview for next week's show.
I wonder where you were going. Mulholland Drive. That's where I was going. Mulholland Drive.
I had a dream about this place. Tell me.
There is no band, and yet we hear a band.
Diane? Camilla. Diane, the car's waiting. This is the girl.
Get out of the car.
I mean, I just came here from Deep River, Ontario, and now I'm in this dream place.
Someone is in trouble. Something bad is happening.
Could be someone's missing, maybe. That's what I'm thinking.
Silencio. Silencio.
That's right. Meet us at the Winkies, where we will be discussing Mulholland Drive. Before we go, I want to thank this week's guest co-hosts, Skizz and Scott. So, Scott, what have you been up to lately, Mr. Expatriate?
Over here in the UK, so if this is running in November, I actually should have a story on Vanity Fair this week, going up this week, which is October the 9th or so. It's about the original October surprise that happened back in 1964. So that should be out this week, theoretically. And other stuff, I'm working on a feature-length documentary, my first feature-length documentary, about a spy for the Stasi, which used to be the East German police, a guy who defected and came to the States, and the CIA put him through school, and then he became an investment banker. So literally within 5 years, he went from being in the secret police to working on Wall Street.
I was very surprised to see that you're working with Vanity Fair. I watched one of your videos without knowing that you had created it. And then when I found out, I was like, oh, hey, I know that guy. I already had shared it on Facebook and everything. And I was just like, this is amazing. And then when I realized that I knew the author, I was like, oh, I felt even better about it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that was the AIDS one. That one was really weird, and that thing went so viral. I then tried to submit it to festivals, and everybody was like, no, we've already seen it. It was just like literally every festival I submitted that to, even with Vanity Fair's backing, they were like, no. So, I mean, which fair enough, people had seen it already, so.
I hear that you're doing a podcast as well.
Yeah, I'm doing a presidential podcast. I kind of had to take the back seat while working on this other story, but yeah, it's called "This Is the President," and I take presidential phone calls and just kind of talk about them, find some of the good ones, find some of the gems, talk about the history that was going on at the time. The last couple podcasts, I had a friend, Harmon Leon, who was here for the Fringe Festival, so we did it together, and that's a format that's working pretty well, so hopefully I'll do a few more of those. I keep them all pretty short because they are presidential phone calls, so they're about 10 minutes long, and we just kind of get into it, play the interesting parts, talk about the history and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's over on iTunes. It's called This Is the President.
So how far back do you go with that? Are you going all the way back to Cleveland or Johnson or what? Well,
the start, I've actually found there's some not phone calls, but press room conferences of FDR. So that's as far as the recordings go back. The new thing I found is I just located a trove of tapes from Reagan, which people didn't think that the presidents were recording, but they would record certain phone calls, and they were buried in the archives. And that's kind of how I found the stuff for the AIDS press conference, But I found a bunch of ones from Reagan, and one was in particular was pretty interesting. I read the description. I was like, oh, I've got to get this tape, and it just says President talks to kidnapper, and I was like, oh my God, I was so excited when I ordered it. But basically, what had happened was some guy had stormed the golf course in Augusta while the president was playing golf there, and then took hostages and demanded to talk to the president. And then they brought a mobile phone out to the president, and then he'd call the kidnapper, and then every time the president would try to call, the kidnapper would just hang up on him. So the whole phone call is just of Reagan going, "This is the president. I hear you want to talk to me." But it's an interesting story. So that's one of the latest ones I have up there on the podcast.
So how about you, Skizz? What are you doing when you're not swinging the bishop?
When am I not swinging the bishop?
Exactly.
I'm trying to finish up what would have been my first feature-length documentary, but it's taken so long to make that it'll probably end up being my third feature-length documentary. Ice Pick to the Moon. It's about Reverend Fred Lane. I've been working on it since 1999. I'm almost done editing, so I'm hoping next year that I'll have that on the festival circuit.
Just don't give it to Vanity Fair and have them show it first.
No, exactly. Just keep it away.
And where can people go to keep up with you, Skizz?
I got a website. It's www.skizz, that's skizz.net. And that page has links to pages for my films and my bands and my schedule and everything.
Well, thank you again, guys, for being on the show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Please head on over to the website, projection-booth.com, where you can find out more about today's episode. You can also find links over to iTunes, where you can rate and review the show, or to Patreon, where you can make a donation to the show. Donors get early access to every episode as long as I'm not running late. So every donation, every rating we get helps the Projection Booth take over the world and keep us safe from burning frogs.
Fucking A. 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 What?
thoughts are oily. Slick advancement for the coming nightmare. They leave me shaking, they sucker punch me, then they slip away. My clammy sheets reflect a random flash of lightning. Then the searchlight, then the spotlight, then the flashlight in the face. Fucking A. Fucking A. Fucking A. Fucking A. Fucking A. The jaws of life have fried my mangled coffin open. Come see the bubbling edges of my rancid seeping residue. Come laugh your ass off as I stagger past the exit. While tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in his petty face. Fucking me! Fucking me! Fucking me! Fucking me! Fucking me! I'm in a game show. I'm in a low-rent, piddly-ass game show. A trip to Hades where thoughts are slugs on greasy peep show parking lots. A simple quiz, a crumb of justice, and I'm giddy for that mocking tick-tick-ticking of the endless final round. You fucking A! Fucking A. Fucking A! The jaws of life have pried my mangled coffin open. Come see the bubbling edges of my rancid seeping residue. Come laugh your ass off as I stagger past the exit. While tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its petty face. Fucking me! Fucking me! Fucking me! Fucking me! Fucking me! Fucking me! You got your bank, your church, your malls, your cops, your guns, your righteous gall, your corporate loot, your fiscal balls. I can dig it, I can dig it. Your boat, your pool, your golf, your car, your bottom line, your upper drawer, your trophy wife, your fat cigar. I can dig it, I can dig it. But your hearts are backed up. Your brains are backed up. Your culture's backed up. I can read your bow with one pergative howl. I'm a bourgeois booty. I'm a lady-doodle. I'm a roto-doodle in the suit of love. I'm an SM tutor. I'm a fag recruiter. I'm a roto-doodle in the suit of love.
relativism, moral relativism, evolutionism.
But when you steal their hearts and minds, you leave their souls and dicks behind.
So load your guns and hide your asses. We will fuck the ruling classes. I'm a bourgeois Buddha. I'm la-di-doo-da. I'm roto-doo-da in the sewer of love, love, love. I'm an SM-tutor. I'm fag recruiter. I'm roto-doo-da in the sewer of love, love, love. I'm bourgeois Buddha. I'm la-di-doo-da. Yeah, I am a roto-doo-da in the sewer of love, love, love. I'm an SM-tutor. I'm fag recruiter. I am the roto-doo-da in the sewer of love, love, love.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Oh, I wish I could take you intravenously, babe.